On behalf of the Madison VA Hospital and Clinics, I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to be here today as we honor the newest member of our Hall of Heroes. I would especially like to welcome our honored guests, the family of Captain Scott Alwyn. My name is Nellie Mitchell. I am the Chief of Patient Administration Services, and I will serve as your Master of Ceremonies for the Hall of Heroes induction ceremony. We will open today's ceremony with the presentation of colors and the national anthem provided by the Wisconsin National Guard. Please rise if you are able. Please remain standing if you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for an invocation by Chaplain Justin Ray. Chaplain.
Good morning. It's good to be together today. We gather to celebrate, remember, and honor Scott. We give thanks for his exploits, accomplishments, and service as a Huey pilot. We give thanks for the light he shined as a son, a brother, husband, father, and friend. We remember Scott's deep concern and his love for all those around him, wherever he was, however uncertain the situation. His love still holds us close to him. In recognizing all that makes Scott special, may we also recognize the light that shines within and through each one of us. And may we be mindful of how we extend concern and love for the people around us today and every day. We gather to celebrate, remember, and honor Scott. What a life, what a light. It is good to be together today.
In 2002, Dr. John Hofer, Then the Chief of Dentistry began the Hall of Heroes program at the William S. Middleton Veterans Hospital. His idea was to honor the veterans in the Madison area whose military service was especially heroic. Since the initial ceremony, the program has inducted 12 veterans representing 4 different branches of service with various awards, including the Distinguished Service Cross, Navy Cross, Distinguished Flying Cross, Silver Star, Bronze Star, and Purple Heart. Captain Scott Alwyn will join the following distinguished veterans into the Hall of Heroes. Private First Class James Anaganopoulos. Sergeant Robert H. Botts. Sergeant Joshua C. Brennan. Sergeant David G. Brenzel. Staff Sergeant Daniel Bush. Sergeant Harry S. Dickerson. Second Lieutenant James A. Duncan. Captain Donald L. Heiliger. Second Lieutenant James S. Morgan. Sergeant First Class Thomas Reno. Corporal James L. Stevenson. Private First Class Ralph J. Warner. We are honored to recognize Captain Scott Alwyn's heroism and celebrate his induction into the Hall of Heroes. We created a short video that talks about our Hall of Heroes here at the William S. Middleton Memorial Hospital.
A hero is a person who is admired or idealized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. While all the veterans that come to the William S. Middleton Memorial Veterans Hospital have demonstrated sacrifice and courage on behalf of our country, there are some who stand out for especially heroic actions during their service. The Hall of Heroes is where we honor such veterans. Located on the main floor of the hospital near the Patient Education Resource Center, we honor veterans that have been patients at the William S. Middleton Memorial Veterans Hospital who have served with valor during their military service in the United States of America. We are proud to honor these veterans who stand out as heroes.
I would now like to introduce our hospital director, John Rohr.
Well, thank you, Nellie, and thank you to the family and friends of our honoree, Scott Alwyn, for joining us today, both in person and virtually, and allowing us the privilege of honoring Scott. The Hall of Heroes is our way here at the Madison VA Hospital to honor and recognize local veterans and service members who have served their country in wartime and have been awarded military decorations for valor, heroism, and specific combat actions. It serves as a reminder of what our courageous veterans have endured and honors the sacrifices that they've made. The Hall of Heroes reinforces VA's sacred mission to fulfill President Lincoln's promise to care for those who have borne the battle by serving and honoring the men and women who are America's veterans. The Hall of Heroes is an inspiration to all of us who work here at the VA hospital and to those who visit us. Today we'd like to honor the memory of Scott's heroism as we induct him into our Hall of Heroes. It is also a special day for Scott's family as we celebrate his induction, and once again, I would like to thank Scott's family and all of those guests in attendance, personally and virtually, for being with us today. We'll now hear Scott's My Life, My Story. My Life, My Story is a VA program that interviews veterans or their family members and develops a short biography that encapsulates the unique contribution of that veteran. These biographies shine a light on each veteran's individual story and serve to honor their service. Our My Life, My Story program coordinator, Thor Ringler, interviewed Scott's family to create his My Life, My Story entry. And at this time, I'd like to ask Thor to come up and share with us the story of Scott Alwyn. Thor?
Thanks, John. And I'd just like to thank the members of Scott's family who I interviewed, Penny and Pam, and 2 of the service members who served with him in Vietnam, who I interviewed for this story. We're here today to celebrate the life and honor the heroism of Scott Alwyn. To do that, we're going to share with you the thoughts and remembrances of 4 people who knew Scott well. His older sister, Penny Kleinhans, his younger sister, Pam Fullerton, his friend and fellow pilot in Vietnam, Ed Strazzini, and his crew chief in Vietnam, Frans Vandenbroek. Penny. Scott, Pam, and I are all members of a large family of 16 children. We are preachers' kids. The 4 eldest were an adopted family of 3 and their best friend, all a little bit older than we were, but we grew up together. We started out in Milwaukee and then moved to a number of different places as my dad became a country preacher. Pam. I think we probably lived in around 15 or 16 different places around the state. They didn't know what to do with such a large family. They'd try to find a place to house us, which usually meant an abandoned farmhouse. Penny. Our dad was an instructor in the Army Air Force in World War II. When we were little, he used to drive us to Billy Mitchell Field in Milwaukee. Back then, there wasn't any security, and we'd park along the runway. We'd have half a gallon of chocolate milk, a package of sliced liver sausage, and a couple of bags of crackers. And we'd sit there and watch the planes take off and land. Scott knew he wanted to fly since he was 6 years old. Pam. He was a preacher's kid and didn't hide it. He thought that there was right and wrong. To us, he was just Scott. He was a leader in the family. We didn't think of him as a hero, but every single one of the guys who came to his funeral or who stopped by over the years called him that. It was incredible hearing the stories of the missions they flew together. And he was enough of a daredevil that he scared the bejesus out of them once in a while. But they also said that if they were going with Scott, they knew he would get them home. Ed. Scott arrived in Vietnam in August of 1967, as did I. We were both assigned to the 68th Assault Helicopter Company. We ended up flying the troop-carrying helicopters known as SLICs, UH-1Ds at the time. Hard work and lots of flying. Long days, some nights, all kinds of weather, and difficult conditions, and sometimes under a rather hostile reception on the ground. I transferred over to flying the attack helicopters, the UH-1C, which we called the Guns. Once the troops were inserted in an area and the SLICs departed, we stayed out there and supported them. You were very much in tune to everything that was going on and had a good insight into what the infantry guys had to deal with. Scott was very much the idealist. He was a guy who didn't smoke or drink or use strong language. That was okay with me, and we became friends. He would occasionally get on me for something that he heard we had done, secondhand stories. I told him, Scott, you've got to come fly with us. You'll see what we really do. Sure enough, he took me up on that one day, and we took him out on a mission. When we came back, he said, yeah, that's what I want to do. Frans. I was assigned to the 68th Assault Helicopter Company as a mechanic. But in June of 1968, I was invited to join the gunship platoon and became a crew chief. The crew chief looks after the helicopter. During the mission, he sits in back with the gunner, but they have the same duty. We have the M60 machine guns in our hands. The pilots and the crews are very much interdependent. We depended on them to get us home safely. They depended on us to keep them alive. At some point, during the latter half of 1968, Scott Alwyn showed up. He was sort of an enigma. He was very quiet, almost sad when he walked up. But when he got into the helicopter and started flying, he totally changed. He became so determined, so committed, that it was startling to see. As a pilot, my goodness, he was one of the most fearless ones I flew with. I always knew that whenever Mr. Alwyn showed up, I was in for an exciting day. Ed. Towards the end of our tour in 1968, most of the guys had been over there a year and had had a bellyful. They were looking forward to going home. Scott and I came down on orders to go to West Germany. As the days got closer, I think it was 2 weeks before we were supposed to leave, he came to me and said, I'm not going. I've extended. I tried to talk him out of it. Only later did I come to learn that he had other reasons that he wanted to stay. beyond his dedication to the mission. He had gotten interested in one of our Vietnamese employees who worked at our officers' club. He would sit at the bar, nursing a soft drink, and chat with her, and fend off some of the other guys who tended to be a little crude at times. He saw himself as her guardian, and we kind of laughed about that. But I didn't realize how deeply he felt for her. Franz. Mr. Alwyn had sublime flying skills. His precision with a helicopter was just outstanding. He could set it down without us even knowing that we had landed. But when it came to managing the mission, Mr. Alwyn was always looking for trouble. He did not mind getting involved. But it wasn't trouble for the sake of trouble. He used the gunship as a way of helping folks on the ground. That's the way he saw it. He didn't brag about the things he accomplished in the helicopter. Lots of pilots did, but Mr. Alwyn wasn't that way. March 23rd, 1969 was my last day in Vietnam. We were patrolling an area, and Scott was the aircraft commander. I spotted some North Vietnamese soldiers running from one hut to another and got on the intercom. "Charlie, sir, 6 o'clock. Scott whipped the helicopter around, got on the radio, and informed the battalion commander, who was flying 2,000 feet above us, "Mustang 17, going hot, rolling in." I remember thinking, wait a minute, he didn't ask for permission. We're attacking the hut, and Scott is firing rockets, maintaining the same angle as long as possible so that he can hit it. I'm leaning out of the cabin with my machine gun pointing forward, and I'm pumping bullets into this target. Scott pulls up at the last second, and the next thing you know, we're going down. The helicopter didn't make the turn. We hit belly first, skipped like a stone, flipped over, and then all hell broke loose. It completely came apart. I was thrown from the helicopter. Miraculously, Scott, the co-pilot, and our gunner staggered out of the broken helicopter, intact and walking. The battalion commander landed within seconds and rescued us. He dropped me off at a field hospital, and the medics discovered that I had a badly broken arm. But other than that, and some cuts and bruises, I was not badly injured. An hour and a half after the crash, I was drifting in and out of consciousness. They're stitching up a cut on my chin, and I have gauze covering my face. I heard this nasally voice asking, "How's Van doing?" I peeked out from under the fabric and saw a .45 revolver hanging really low on a hip. I recognized it as Scott's sidearm and knew he was checking up on his crew chief. That was the last time I saw him. Ed. I came back to Vietnam in 1970, but I was way up north, so there was no way to visit Scott. I was able to call our old unit and ask to speak to him, but he had just left to go back to the States with his wife. I had a good idea who that was. Then, around Christmas time in 1976, I was here in Virginia and got an obvious red and green Christmas card. I saw that the return address said Alwyn in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, or someplace. I thought, oh, great, he found me. I tear open the envelope, and it was a card, a true Christmas card. I still have it, from his wife, telling me that he had been killed back in July of that year. I went from being so excited to reconnect to learning of this tragic event. It just took the breath out of me. Penny. He was 31 when he died, at the hands of a drunk driver, for heaven's sake, after everything that he went through in Vietnam. 5 tours, 136 air medals, the most of any pilot who served there. I hate to say this, but I think it was something that we never recovered from. He meant something different to every one of us, but he meant so much to each of us. Pam. When he was 12, I made the mistake of uttering the word adventure to Scott. All I wanted to do was talk about Stanley Livingston's adventure finding the Nile. His comeback was, well, let's find the source of our own Nile. So we built a raft out of scavenged lumber and went upstream, looking for the source of the Rock River. We pulled that raft probably 6 or 7 hours up the Rock River, and at that point the raft disintegrated in a swamp, and we almost killed ourselves. But Scott managed to save me, and we crawled out through the sawgrass and mud, cut to ribbons, only to find out that we had only made it 5 miles out of Fort Atkinson. By the time we got to a road, we were very distressed and disappointed. We're squelching along in our sneakers, and all of a sudden, Scott turns to me with this big grin and says, "Next time, we're going to try for the source of the real Nile."
Thank you, Thor, for sharing Scott's story with us. I would like to invite Pam Fullerton and Penny Kleinhans up to read Scott's biography.
My name is Penelope Kleinhans Alwyn. I'm the Penny Penelope that is referred to. I'm sorry to tell you that this is going to take a little time, so get comfortable. This is a project that I started on probably 5 years ago already. Sort of messed it up, had a lot of things happen in the interim, and finally got around to it with some wonderful people here at the VA who accepted my papers and proceeded to help us get to where we are today, as well as my sister Pamela, who is making everything possible for me. I'm especially pleased today to see the young people in our family that are here. Part of what I'm going to read and share with you is meant for them. My business has been young people as a teacher, principal, and superintendent of schools, and I care deeply about what is being taught and told to our young people today in our schools. My thoughts today are going to center upon 3 main topics that together I believe constitute the reasons we are here today honoring my brother, Captain Scott R. Alwyn. It's fitting kind of today. This is the day that Wisconsin became a state in 1848. So we celebrate our state by honoring one of her native sons, along with others up in the Hall of Heroes. And there are many, I know. But I want Scott to be a representative for all of them. I find the ideas that are encapsulated in a straightforward way in a paper that was written by a sophomore and high school student from Monroe, Wisconsin. The following are excerpts taken from that paper. In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its maximum hour of danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. President John F. Kennedy addressed the nation with these words at his inaugural speech on January 20th, 1961. Scott Alwyn was a teenage boy living in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, just 16 at the time, as he listened to those words. Years later, in a land far from home in Vietnam, Scott wrote a letter home to the editor of his local newspaper, addressing the public of his community. He wrote, "The concept that no man is an island separate of itself, and that each is a part of the whole, goes for nations as well. Were we to hear the bell toll for freedom in Vietnam, we would have to know for a certainty that it tolls for ours also. We can no longer live in honor if we think we be uninvolved with what happens in the world, even if it is the farthest points on the globe." Already you know that he was the eldest of children of Joanne and Walter Alwyn. And those older group of us, we kind of divide ourselves in groups. There are so many of us, 4 older, 4 middle, 4 longer. But the eldest were children out of World War II. War babies born in the time of war. We recall watching movies about the Great Wars, movies that glamorized the heroes and romanticized and simplified the causes. They remember thinking Earl Flynn was as dashing and handsome and brave as any man could be. They remember that their father was a flyboy in World War II and that he taught them these basic values, that they need to act, They cannot be complacent, that they have to get out there and be a leader for their cause. This idea was instilled in all of them, including the oldest boy of the family, Scott Alwyn. His brothers and sisters told me this background is important to know because they believe it helps to understand Scott's chosen path in life. It is the experience of Scott and his family that this paper explores. It explores the period during the war and the years that their nation was at war in Vietnam. With her son leaving for war, Scott's mother, Joanne Alwyn, wrote to express her thoughts on his actions. It is a poem entitled, "A Son Leaves Home," and it reads as follows. "I thought him my son, and then he made me know. Oh, kindly, but with firmness men must have, which the womb was accidentally so. Well, death, don't show. Ache fingers ache, but kill the feeble reach toward curls once warmth you gently touched and kissed and smoothed, pure love to teach. Come, grace beseeched. Choke back each hush sound ere it burst from breast with creaking chair, sweet nights remembered. Come, courage you know, he's left the nest. My God, grant rest." Pamela, now grown, recalls hearing the story of her brother's strategizing and bravery when he was awarded his first Distinguished Flying Cross. I asked how she felt about her brother going away to fight in Vietnam, and she said, "Well, I was afraid. But the funny thing is, before Scott left for the Air Force Academy, we had worked late shifts and watched old war movies together. Scott always talked about wanting to be a hero. He would ask, why isn't it possible to be heroic? The media always found flaws in their heroes, and they would pull them apart in the media. I thought honor and heroism was a good thing for Scott. Scott was a hero and a warrior. He was honored. He's being honored today, and it suits him." Pamela never really believed that we should have been in the war with Vietnam. It was a dim, almost vague feeling at first. Then it became more focused, more significant. I was always conflicted over my feelings because Scott was adamant about the fact that we needed to be there, and I had faith in Scott. Later on, I became more sure because of Scott. He always said, "Forget about the Russians. In the end, it will be the Chinese." Pamela was a student at UW-Madison, as was I at UW-Whitewater during this early period of time. And later, his younger brothers and sisters and siblings as well were in college. We all experienced what Pamela and Lance expressed so well, and I returned to the papers again. The majority of the students we were in school with were anti-war. Even though I was against the war, I couldn't sit there and not say what Scott would have said. So I always ended up on the other end, even though I kept the concept we didn't belong there. I couldn't abandon and leave him. Like her siblings, Pamela struggled over the subject of the war. Even though many of them felt that we shouldn't have been in Vietnam, they were continually conflicted over their views and the fact that their brother believed so strongly in the principle of the war and that he was over in Vietnam fighting. To him, it was an adventure. He was always off to new places, circumstances, situations with a kind of man the torpedoes, full speed ahead way about him. He was loyal and moral. He did not hide his principles under a bushel. In sum, he was cool Fonzie before there was Fonzie. Scott's younger brother, Lance, told me this. The second eldest, son of Walter and Joanne, he had always felt positive of Scott's wanting to go to war. His participation in the war was, in my estimation, a chosen course of action that evidenced his quest of service, a familial sense of purpose. Scott always felt that everyone has to search for their life purpose, and by enlisting in the Army, he believed that he had found his purpose. By fulfilling his call to duty and service, he thought he was improving humanity. It was Scott's way of charting his life course. It was in this arena that Scott wed his thirst for both adventure with a life of service, that is, serving to improve the conditions of humanity for others, in this case, those forced into oppression. In a letter to Lance, Lance recalls Scott wrote that part of his reasoning for going to war resided in that which Camus had written about also. That is, from the moment the war is, any judgment that does not embrace it is false. I can only guess that to Scott, acceptance of the war as one manifestation of the absurdity of the human condition finally prevailed over resignation and despair about it. On one of Scott's return trips home from Vietnam, Lance traveled down to Texas, where Scott was on R&R, rest and relaxation, supposedly. While visiting, Scott and Lance traveled to an old ship graveyard and snuck into some ghost ships. Scott did not talk about the war because of two things. First, he always had a broader picture of life. He viewed life in broader strokes, as if stepping back from an encounter allowed him to see things more clearly and within a bigger picture of what life is all about. Second, he did not talk about it because of how horrific it was. He was not immune to the horrors he not only saw, but in which he himself had participated. These vivid activities scar the soul and are not easily erased from the mind's eye. Little wonder then why soldiers, Scott among them, wished to let sleeping dogs lie. As with Scott firmly believed in the sonnet by Emma Lazarus inscribed on the bottom of the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. Scott had mentioned, as Lance remembers it, that he saw his efforts in the Vietnam War as supporting with true deeds and not just empty words that very inscription on the Statue of Liberty, an ideal that he believed America stood for. As with Pam, Lance respected Scott's decisions for going to war. Lance supported Scott every step of the way, but also demonstrated his opposing beliefs on the war by protesting. All the Alwyn children were raised to fight for what they believe in. The way Lance and many younger Americans fought for their beliefs was to protest and to take action. There were marches on Washington, D.C. and state capitals all around the nation. Some young men avoided the draft by going to Canada. Lance and many of his fellow students at college took over the administrative buildings and took part in many protests. Through all of his protesting, though, Lance still refused the trip to Canada out of loyalty and respect for Scott and his views. As you remember, he did have a low lottery number, and if his number was pulled out of the spinning contraption with the numbered balls in it, he would have gone, if for no other reason than his brother was there. As his father Walter sees it looking back, Scott's participation in the war seemed to be his way of following the long line of warriors on the Robinson side of the family. That would be his mother's. Walter and Joanne weren't the type of parents that interfered with the decisions their children decided to make. Walter told me that. They raised their children to take action and to rise up and be a leader when the time or circumstances called for it. On one of his return trips home, Scott wanted to go to Chicago, Illinois, to purchase a microphone to place on his helicopter. And also he wanted to travel to visit the families of the men of his squadron. He wanted to be able to talk to the people on the ground. Walter remembers Scott saying that he didn't want to shoot innocent people. He didn't want to kill peasants. Scott was anxious to get into the war, but he never wanted to be a gunship pilot. He never wanted to kill anyone, Walter said. Walter traveled with his son, Scott, to visit the families of the men in the squadron that had been killed. We spent 3 days visiting their families. Scott wanted to meet their families, to meet these men's parents, to talk with them, and to tell them about their sons. This young author goes on to write about the history of that long, long war and uncertainties created by, among other things, having the brutality of it brought into our living rooms as we watched. Almost 60,000 of our brothers, husbands, fathers, uncles, nieces, nephews, and friends were dying, along with thousands of innocent Vietnamese. The war in Vietnam had become a civil war between North and South. The North Vietnamese wanted to adopt communism as their form of national government. The communist ideology of Ho Chi Minh led us to switch sides and set up an anti-communist regime in the South. The North Vietnamese were fighting to unify their country, and the United States believed it was fighting to defend freedom and democracy. The basis of our actions was based on what was called the domino theory. If communism took over Vietnam and Indochina, then it would continue to spread until it took over more and more of the world. We feared the spread of communism, and we did what we had to do to try to prevent the expansion of it. As Pamela relayed to her, the younger generation asked, why are we in this war? If we're going to be a part of this war, why aren't we winning? If we can't win this war, then get us out of Vietnam. We wanted out of that war so badly, we began losing sight of the principle and the purpose for why we were in Vietnam. Scott wrote to Penny, his older sister by 15 months, saying, I am really sorry to see that the American people were so easily led to lose sight of the principles behind the fighting here. It is simple to me as Patrick Henry's statement on the coming of the American Revolution. What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Both Scott and Patrick Henry believed that putting up with the slavery of a people having to give up their freedom was not an acceptable price to pay for peace. Allen objected to the idea of slavery and felt so strongly that his and America's war effort was important to obtaining the freedom the Southern Vietnamese so rightly deserved. He voluntarily served 5 tours for a total of 5.5 years. To oppose the war as things stand now and have stood in the past is nothing but gross moral cowardice, Scott wrote in a letter home to Penny. Speaking on the subject of war, then Lieutenant Allen believed that our fighting was for practical reasons, the things which make it possible for us to live here on this earth the way that we do. Penny's daughter, Tara, and Scott's niece, my mother, said to me when I interviewed her, I was only just a young kid, maybe a kindergartner when Scott came home. So I don't remember anything. I don't know or remember much except the same stories that you heard. But I think it's possible Scott went into the war with certain reasons for doing so, like the idea of his father being a World War II pilot, and he was going to carry on that legacy. And also the image in his mind of being like the movie star pilots and heroes he'd seen on the big screen, and even for the adventure of it. But maybe over time he stayed for different reasons altogether. Not just the ideals he held dear like freedom and the right of a people to have a voice in their own government, but maybe just to have a purposeful life to help the people he saw living in poverty, to stay and fight with the guys who counted on him to pull him out of scraps alive, to be able to be close to a woman he'd fallen in love with. Over time, I would bet his reasons changed, because the real life experience of war has to change a person. Many young men have gone to war for reasons, ideas such as that. Others had no choice, and for some it could have been the principles behind fighting. Those are the ideas that many men held on to when they first entered the war. They hadn't seen war up close and personal yet. Maybe by the time you leave, you aren't there for the same reasons anymore. Maybe by the time you leave, it's just the fact that you made a commitment to something or someone, and you're a person who stays by that commitment. Or maybe you stay because just for the very personal and simple reason of the guy next to you. These guys are my friends, my brothers, my comrades. I need to stay here and fight by their side because I can't leave them behind. We saw the pictures in the print media every day and on the TV. War is one thing when it's just a political disagreement you read about, when it is a distant place. But it becomes this whole other thing when you see the ugly video footage and when it's not just a soldier you're looking at anymore, but your brother or your son you're looking at in all of the pictures being shown. It's also complicated because war obviously brings so much death and destruction. It also inspires poets and philosophers. It tears apart families, but also creates new ones, brothers. You see soldiers calling each other. It's also complicated for the reason that the purpose of being involved in the war is sometimes unclear, and seems like it can change. What began as a fight to keep the big spreading evil of communism from coming to American shores. That's how Penny and most of Scott's siblings describe their understanding of why the U.S. went to fight in Vietnam and what Scott went for. Seemed to lose its motivations, and over time became not so much about defending Americans at home, but helping the Vietnamese people and fighting for your buddy next to you. Scott was known for writing things down on pads of paper as he would think them, and this is one of the last things he wrote before his death, found scribbled in an appointment book of his on Saturday, May 1st, 1976. A philosophy is a kind of overview fitting together the various aspects and actions of life and providing a secure ground for fitting together the various aspects and providing a secure ground for the meaning and the value of the activities of life. And this is something that each person in each generation must do for himself. If it is not done, the person is shallow and the life is hollow. She summarizes in this way. One thing that really bothered me as I researched the paper is how, by the end of the war, America so cruelly treated the men that had fought over there and risked their lives to defend the ideals of democracy and freedom. Everyday citizens actually spat on them when they came home to the United States. In my interview with Scott's older sister, Penny, she said, we had to sustain democracy, and I think that was at least one man's view of the war. Why he went, why he stayed, why he wouldn't give up. It doesn't seem right that people back home would not respect one of their own citizens who served them with that purpose. Some soldiers went to war because they were drafted and fought because they had to. But for some, like Scott, it was that they were fighting for what they believed and what they felt was truly right. If you don't believe in something, you drift. You have to have something that you believe in, and you have to be willing to fight for it and work for it. In the end, when it comes to this family, my family, war is ultimately a personal experience. Perhaps more than any other family member, it is a burden on the heart of a mother more than any other that is carried with her until the end of time. Joanne Robinson Owen, Scott's mother, and my great-grandma never forgot her son. She never forgot the things he accomplished in this world, and she has never gotten over losing him. Joanne has written many poems about her son. The poem Joanne wrote when she learned of the death of her son is entitled For Our Scott. It reads as follows.
Hear this, an eagle's dead, torn, mutilated, battered and bruised, his once unfailing spirit fled. And you who say you nature love, cry out, oh, now will government bodies and funds his woeful murder pursue? But more than that, a man we loved is lost, a son so dear, strong, compassionate, courage and fire, by God unique and without peer. His death no honored warrior grave evoked, for shame, O world forlorn. His soldier flyer never entered it, earned it more. Angels o'er his humble grave will mourn, a country churchyard, hallowed beyond words, that holds home from the war. the one who dreamed and dared and loved to fly, an eagle downed, now free to soar.
An honorable, loyal, courageous man of principle. As a person, again, who thinks that young people today need examples, not to drift, to have something to fight for, I hold up my brother, Captain Scott R. Alwyn. And I thank the girl who wrote this, my granddaughter, Corinne Trudiger, who wrote this when she was 16, grew up to become an attorney after graduating from Marquette Law School, is now in practice, her mother's practice in Monroe, Wisconsin, and as well as an assistant DA. Thank you, Coco. Thank you for listening.
You can tell why it was Penny who started this process for us. She speaks from her heart. My name is Pamela Fullerton, and I'm going to keep this kind of brief. You know, as preacher's kids, many of us keep candles burning in our homes for the stranger who wanders by. It's something that our father taught us to do. And Scott was that. He was a candle and burned brightly in a very dark time. One of the things that was told to me by some guy sitting on the gray carpet in Mother's living room up in Hamburg, Wisconsin, in the town of Berlin. And I don't even know the guy's name, for heaven's sakes. And as he began to tell me this story, he began to shake. So this, 40-year-old, 50-year-old guy by that time is sitting on the carpet talking to me. And he says, he said, Scott earned those Distinguished Flying Crosses for volunteer missions. And he said, let me tell you about one of them. He said there was an orphanage, a Catholic orphanage that was about to be overrun. And they asked if somebody wanted to fly in there and see if they could get some of the kids out. And needless to say, one hand went up, Scott Alwyn. And he said, I'm going to take just a gunner with me so we've got more room. And we flew out and we flew over to where the coordinates were for this orphanage. And he said, my God, I looked down and he said it had a courtyard. And he said, I swear to God, there were only 3 or 4 inches of clearance for the rotor blades. He said, now I know that's not true. But this is at the point he began to kind of tremble. He said, I'm sure there were at least 3 or 4 feet. But he said, nobody but an idiot or Captain Alwyn would ever take a helicopter into some place like that. And he said, Scott set down the helicopter. He said, we all called him a silver dollar driver because his hand on that cyclic was so in tune with that machine that it never moved further than the width of a silver dollar. And he set that machine down and they started to send out the kids who were going to go back with us. And he said, there stood the 2 nuns, the older children, and the priest who were not going to be able to get out and who were looking at certain death when the Viet Cong overran their orphanage, overran their compound. And he said, there I am in the back, packing these kids in every space I can find. And he said, as I turned to the front of the helicopter, the windshield when we were lifting off, he said, there was that priest making the sign of the cross over this war machine, taking off with their children to rescue them, being piloted by the preacher's kid that we all knew Scott was. And he said that's what he got one of those DFCs for. And I think that is emblematic of the kind of person that Scott was. When I say he was a preacher's kid, I mean he knew his Bible. And one of his favorite passages was a quote from the prophet Isaiah, and it goes as follows. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?" Then I said, "Here am I, send me." And that was one of Scott's favorite verses. It is Isaiah 6:8, chapter 6, verse 8. It is either ironic or fate that for his whole military career, the Assault Helicopter Company in which he performed such heroic deeds was the 6-8, the 68th Assault Helicopter Company. And I am so proud that my brother stayed true to his beliefs and true to his ethics, his morals, and his upbringing as a preacher's kid. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela and Penny. I would like to invite Sean Alwyn to the podium to read the citation on Scott's Distinguished Flying Cross.
It was unclear if I was supposed to have any extra time. And I'm going to beg 4 minutes of your time. I'm going to follow the old Army maxim, which is ask forgiveness, not permission. I want to give particular greetings to my family, those of you who are serving our veterans here at the Middleton VA Hospital, and especially to our veterans present today. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice. I am speaking this morning because I am Scott's youngest sibling. I am also his only sibling that served in the military. In addition to the last 5 years of my medical career were spent at the Janesville VA clinic. I figured this combination buys me about 4 minutes of your time to talk about the Scott Alwyn that I knew. I'm not here to talk about my brother's war exploits. I was 16 when Scott died, and I think he probably considered me too young for the more intense war stories. Stories of being shot down among the enemy and the hand-to-hand combat needed to get back home are told by other members of my family. His history and commendation speak for themselves, as much as any of these ever do convey the reality of what the combat veteran actually experiences. I'm sorry, I have stage fright and I can't breathe. Instead, I would like to speak of Scott's legacy to me as an Army officer. Some of the lessons he taught were of chivalry and courtesy. Why do we walk on the left side of those we show honor to? To protect their weaker sword arm. Why do we walk on the street side of the sidewalk? Because that's where the contents of the chamber pots came down when they were emptied out the windows. He taught me these things even though he probably never thought his younger, somewhat nerdy brother would ever end up in the military. I'm sure he felt that these were universal courtesies that we all need to pay attention to. But he also taught me some more things that were specific lessons he had learned in the Army, which I thought of often during my military service, and which I have come to see apply to us all in any of the many roles life thrusts upon us. I can clearly identify 3 principles that he often discussed with me. Those of you who are in the military or had a good mentor will probably recognize some variation of these. First, never ask anyone to do something that you yourself would not do. And that doesn't just mean being willing to do a task. It means at least once your subordinates have to see you do it. Grab the shovel, take the night shift, get dirty. The next time you have to tell someone else to do that job, it will be easier for you as well as for them. Second, always take care of your subordinates first. I was in the peacetime Army, so I do not have war stories, but I had some interesting training experiences. And when you're in the Yakima Flats in the rain and up to your ankles in mud, there were the officers who had their tents set up first and got out of the rain. And then there were the ones who helped get the enlisted tents up first. I have luckily had the opportunity to hear from his men which of these types Scott was. Third, this will resonate with my family. When in doubt, do your duty. There are a number of quotes I remember from Scott when I was young. Just nail it was a favorite of mine, which I learned meant stop thinking so much and get on with the mission at hand. But not one quote have I thought about more often in my medical career and my life than, when in doubt, do your duty. Who among us has not often been assailed by doubts about the choices we make in life, big and small, or have felt overcome with tiredness, despair, or self-pity? Scott called on me first to understand what my duty was. In the Army, this was accomplishing the mission. In my career, it was caring for my patient. In my life, it is living with honor and honoring others. I am pretty sure I did not always live up to this. I don't even know if Scott always did. But I am 100% sure that this lesson, learned by Scott during his Army career and passed down to me for mine, made me a better soldier and a better person than I would have been otherwise. Because the one thing I do know about Scott was that he always tried to live up to his ideals. And because of the love I felt for him and understanding the honor he deserved for what he had accomplished, it made me want to live up to those ideals also. In this, and so many other ways, he made me a better man than I would have been. In the end, this is what I honor my big brother for. I now also have the privilege of reading Scott's commendation for the Distinguished Flying Cross. For extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight, evidenced by voluntary actions above and beyond the call of duty, Lieutenant Alwyn has distinguished himself by exceptionally meritorious achievement as a team leader of a helicopter gun platoon. His exemplary leadership in all assigned missions resulted in highly successful destruction of the enemy force. Performing his duties as liaison officer for the battalion and with the Air Force, his sound judgment enabled him to expertly coordinate numerous successful airstrikes against the enemy. He was also instrumental in establishing several aviation safety and standardization programs within his unit, causing a reduction of accidents. The 100+ air medals which he has accumulated attest to his outstanding knowledge and flying skill as an Army aviator. Lieutenant Alwyn's untiring efforts, devotion to duty, professional airmanship have resulted in a record of numerous achievements. His actions were in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army.
Thank you, Sean. Would Pamela and Penny please join the hospital director, John Rohr, on stage for the formal induction and unveiling of the plaque? Please stand if you are able. While serving in the Army, Scott earned many awards, including the Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross with Oak Leaf Cluster, Bronze Star with Oak Leaf Cluster, the Purple Heart with 3 Oak Leaf Clusters, the Meritorious Service Medal, and an unprecedented number of air medals. Through action and deed, he brought great credit upon himself, his family, his service, and his country. It is my honor to formally induct Captain Scott Alwyn into the William S. Middleton Memorial Veterans Hospital Hall of Heroes. You can remove the cloth. Scott's plaque will be placed in the Hall of Heroes next to the other valorous veterans. The Hall of Heroes is located on the first floor next to the Patient Education and Resource Center. Please be seated. I would like to thank Penny, Sean, and Pamela for being here and sharing Scott's life with us. I would also like to thank Penny for submitting Scott's application and giving us the opportunity to honor Scott. I would also like to thank all the other family members who were able to join us today. Each family member will receive a certificate after the ceremony as they leave the auditorium, as a memorial gift to commemorate this occasion. Please rise if you are able for the benediction. Chaplain Wright.
It was an honor to be with you all here today. What a life and what a light. Friends, life is good, but life is short. We do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who journey with us. So be swift to love and make haste to be kind. And may your light shine brightly everywhere you go.
Thank you, Chaplain. And this concludes our ceremony. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.